Hello and welcome to Layaways. I'm Dave Lay. I'm your host. Here we give you the latest scoop and my input on current events and bizarre news. Although today we're going to be focusing primarily on current events because there's some pressing issues that could potentially affect all of us in some terrible ways. So, what we're going to start today off with is digital rights, the internet, net neutrality, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and how this affects all of us. So, I'm sure all of us are familiar by now. We've seen circulated footage, but only through various internet news articles on net neutrality. So, what's been going on? I think it was last year that FCC Chairman Tom Wheeler put out a proposal so that what this would mean is that big corporations and what have you who paid extra could have access to the higher speed levels of the internet, a tiered system, and the rest of us would be crawling along at speeds that are probably about what a 56K modem is. Anybody remember 56K dial-up modems? How slow that was, how you'd watch real audio or real video, it would constantly rebuffer, and when you connect to the internet, it'd go beep, boop, boop, beep, boop, boop, ee-craw. Yeah, we remember those days. So, but now that we have things like YouTube videos, such as this one that you're watching here, or Netflix, or other stuff, that would be pretty bad for all of us, especially if you're paying extra for high-speed internet. In fact, I don't know if anybody uses dial-up anymore, but a return to dial-up speeds when our technology has progressed, no thank you. So what net neutrality basically means is to keep things the way they are. And this is a nonpartisan issue. I actually want to keep this episode more nonpartisan than the initial drafts of this show were, by the way. But this is a nonpartisan thing. So, I mean, both my friends on the right and the left, and I have friends on both sides of the aisle, have pretty much been strongly in favor of net neutrality. Net neutrality basically means to keep things the way they are. And President Obama recently did good. We kept signing petitions and writing letters to him, and he did not disappoint. He spoke out in favor of net neutrality and asked Tom Wheeler to just, cool it with the fast lanes and slow lanes. He did the right thing. And I have to commend the president for this, but, there's another internet issue that threatens us more than slow lanes right now. And unfortunately, the president's still trying to push it. And I will get into that shortly. That is the Trans-Pacific Partnership, otherwise known as the TPP. What this is it's another free trade agreement. Sort of like NAFTA, but worse. But the most terrifying aspect of the TPP are the intellectual property tenets. Does anybody remember the Stop Online Piracy Act, aka SOPA? That one came out in 2010, and it passed both houses, both the House and the Senate, but we were able to get rid of it by protesting. So what SOPA had was it allowed your internet service provider to spy on you and monitor your activity. There was a 3 strikes copyright violation rule. And what this means was that you would have to trigger 3 strikes, 3 copyright violations, and they could just boot you from the internet. No appeals, nothing. Just boom. And their thresholds of what would qualify that are pretty vague. If you want to sing a cover song on your YouTube channel, I wanted to do some cover songs on this channel here, but since the whole Trans-Pacific Partnership thing has been a threat, I have held off on that. Justin Bieber, say what you will about him, I'm not a big fan of him, but he got famous by doing cover songs on YouTube. And now he's worth more than $100 million. That got him famous. But that would be a copyright violation under SOPA. if you are doing a video that's completely unrelated, but your radio's on in the background playing a copyrighted song, boom, copyright violation. In fact, the thresholds of what would trigger those was vague. There's a ton of them. And the intellectual property tenets of the TPP have that same 3 strikes thing in them, but they have something worse. There's another tenet in there that gives provisions to authorities. I don't know who specifically, but it allows them to, if you have racked up enough copyright violations, to confiscate your computer. And if you like me work in IT and your important work's on your computer, or if you also like me are a musician and you do your music on your computer, or if you're a filmmaker and your films are on your computer, your artwork's on your computer, that's really shitty news. That'll put you up a creek. And you do not want that. And not to mention that would be a Fourth Amendment violation, not to mention that also a First Amendment violation, as was SOPA, First Amendment violation. So, that's there. And these intellectual property tenets in the TPP have literally, especially, it literally scared me so much that I had trouble sleeping because of it. And the thing is that SOPA was bipartisan. You had people on both sides of the aisle supporting it. There was on the Republican side, SOPA, one of the architects of SOPA on the Republican side was Representative Bob Goodlatte. No, not the kind you find at Starbucks, and he's really not that good a latte, although I wouldn't drink him anyway. I don't want to find out. And on the left, there was Democratic Senator Patrick Leahy and a few others. But, I think also maybe some film company offered him a cameo in the next Batman movie if he would support this. I don't know. We all know that he's a Batman fan. But there was also opposition on both sides. From on the left, there was Lois Capps, Ron Wyden, and a few others, Jared Polis, Norman Solomon. And on the right, surprise, Darrell Issa was against SOPA. I haven't always seen eye to eye with Darrell Issa, but him being against SOPA was one of the few things that I agreed with him upon. Bravo, sir. Anyways, these same tenets are in the TPP. And they've been saying that since the Republicans have won both the House and the Senate, there's now the greater chance that they're going to try to ram through the TPP and fast track it. And that possibility has scared me so much that I had trouble sleeping. But, what's strange is that even though our Democratic president is for this is probably the one issue where the Republicans are not doing their usual, if Obama's for it, I'm against it routine, which is probably the one time they need to do it the most. And yet, the president's own party, mostly the Democrats, are against it, although we do not need to despair just yet because some of the Republicans are against the TPP. Rand Paul, for instance, is against it. I think his dad might be against it too, although Rand Paul recently changed his tune and is now for it, but I think there's some other Republicans that are against it too. And as far as Democrats that are for this one really surprises me. Senator Ron Wyden, who was one of the leading voices against SOPA, is trying to craft a different version of the fast track bill known as Smart Track, which would essentially allow the president to fast track the TPP, but do it smart tracking. Considering, why is he supporting a treaty that has SOPA-like tenets when he was one of the primary voices against SOPA? I don't get it. But, and here's the thing about why these digital rights matter. Things like SOPA, which is gone. Here's the thing with SOPA. We all stood up and protested. We knew it was coming. We all changed our Facebook profile pictures to black squares or censored icons. We went on an internet strike for the day to protest, and it worked. Even though it passed both houses of Congress, it stalled. It was gone. But we have to fight this battle all over again with the TPP. And here's the thing. The intellectual property tenets are probably the worst part of the TPP. But there's literally no... And the reason why I know about this is first WikiLeaks leaked a lot of parts of the TPP, including the intellectual property tenets. And then Forbes magazine picked it up. Forbes magazine. Everyone knows Forbes magazine. But they're pretty much the only mainstream media source that has even bothered to cover this. So you have not seen anything on the news channels about this. And if so, they've likely been very vague and not mentioned what this will do to internet rights. But the thing about the TPP is it's not just the intellectual property tenets, although that's the most horrible part of it. Every single tenet of the TPP that has been revealed that I have seen, they all suck. It's basically, I refer to the TPP as a colossal shitstorm of bad ideas treaty, because that's basically what it is. And why do digital rights matter? Let's start there. Now, I'm going to tell my story, but before I do this, I need to mention that I'm not telling my story to be all ego or woe is me, but I'm doing this because I know that somewhere out there, some of you watching this may have a similar story to me. In fact, probably a lot of you do. For some of you, it may even be almost identical, but here it is. I am a musician who depends on the internet to release for exposure and for sales. And I want to, I've been streaming album tracks as I complete them, but I also want to sell my album when it's done on iTunes, on Amazon, on Google Play, and stream it through Pandora and Spotify and others. Plus, I also, as my day job, I work IT. And the higher paying, I have 2 jobs. And the higher paying one, I work entirely at home from the internet. So I'm literally dependent on the internet. Plus, not just for that sort of stuff, but as someone with an autistic spectrum disorder, the internet has been really helpful for me personally, for meeting people with common interests, which I otherwise have trouble doing. In fact, I have difficulties meeting people in general. And also for online dating. Hey, I don't want to get into that too much for these videos because it's not about my personal life, but it's something else that it's been helpful for. For me, the internet has been a lifeline. The internet as it is. And I know that for a lot of you too, your story probably sounds a lot like mine. You depend on the internet for a lot of things. So, for that reason, I'm saying that digital rights are the free speech battle of our time, and we cannot let up on this one. We all have to throw our hats into the ring and stand up and raise our voices. But let's go into further qualities of the TPP. It's not just digital rights. Anyone remember NAFTA, the previous free trade agreement? We lost a whole bunch of American jobs, but hey, you don't see as much stuff made in USA anymore. But hey, there's a lot of shit made in China for rock-bottom prices everywhere you go. Just one of the results of NAFTA. And it's been said that the TPP also has NAFTA-like tenets to it that are basically like NAFTA on steroids. Ooh, scary. And it'll classify all sorts of things as trade barriers. GMO labels. Do you want to know if you're eating Frankenfood? It'll be a trade barrier. What about U.S. food safety standards? Trade barrier. Country of origin labels? Trade barrier. And by the way, I should mention that one of the reasons why imported seafood has been rejected by the FDA is because it contains fecal bacteria. So enjoy eating your literally crappy shrimp because those pesky food safety standards are a trade barrier. Buy American, trade barrier. Buy local, trade barrier. All sorts of things are trade barriers. What'll this do to affordable medicine? Trade barrier. And what about patents? This will allow patents on medical procedures. So a doctor who performs a medical procedure that saves a life, even if it saves a life, if it infringes upon a patent, could be arrested. That shouldn't happen. That's just crazy. So, and there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff that's been leaked about it. Not one of it's good. It's a clusterfuck. But here's the thing. Even though, and there was a bunch of protests staged earlier in the year, and even though the Asian countries are the ones that would benefit the most from this treaty, their citizens don't want it either. I can imagine that being the case for Japan especially, Japan had one of the largest protests about it earlier in the year. And because their culture has a lot of use of parodies and satires of copyrighted material, or potentially copyrighted material, that'd screw with their culture so much. You can see why they don't want it. Taiwan, they had a big protest too. And recently, and I don't know about mainland China though, because they already have nasty internet censorship. It's been rumored that they have a kill switch for the internet that the Chinese government can operate so that the Chinese citizens won't get access to the internet when they deem it a threat. But I don't know if that's true or not. What I do know, though, is that someone I know, or I heard from someone I know who visited China, that when they went there, that the internet had censorship on it, and Google, and even Facebook were censored. What the actual fuck? That shouldn't happen. That's like a free speech violation. First Amendment violation. Although they don't have the First Amendment in China, but still. We should not be seeing stuff like that here. Imagine it being like that here. And as far as partisan issues go, it's like they said, since the Republicans won both houses of Congress, they're going to it's been rumored that they're going to try to ram this through. We know that Mitch McConnell spoke out for the TPP. So did John Boehner. Ugh. Just the thought that even the intellectual property tenants could actually get into law, that chance is higher. That has terrified me so much that I had trouble sleeping. But here's the thing. It's even worse because unlike NAFTA, there's no expiration date, and it's going to be really difficult to get out of. And there's even provisions written in it that make it difficult to withdraw from. So we cannot let this go through at all. And more recently, this is the week of action, by the way, and there have been more recent protests. The negotiations are going on now in Australia and New Zealand, and their citizens have been vociferous in terms of their protests. They have been profusely protesting this. Look at pictures of the New Zealand protests on the TPP and you'll see what I mean. What's stopping us from doing that? Simple. Like I said earlier, not a lot of media coverage. But, hey, everyone's been kvetching about Ebola and ISIS. Well, there's been a lot of media coverage of that, and those things don't pose much of a threat. Meanwhile, this does, and it's pretty much squeaked by unnoticed. And here's the thing. Like I said, the whole partisan thing is not necessarily absolute. And what I think we should all do is we should write letters, make phone calls. If you've even got the free time to meet up with your congressman or senator and chat with them a bit about this so that they have some idea what's up, because I think another part of it is that a lot of them don't know. Please do. Every single step we can counts, and also sign any petitions you find on this. Digital rights are the free speech issue of our time. We cannot screw this one up. I depend on it, as do many of you. And you know, we together we can do this. And Mr. President, I don't know if you're watching this, but I want to again say thank you for standing up for net neutrality and reining in on the FCC and slow lanes. But if you're going to do that, why not put your money where your mouth is, and also get rid of the TPP, or at least get rid of the intellectual property tenets, and make sure that those are off the table. Please bring back the hope that you inspired when you said, "We have never been a collection of red and blue states. We are and always will be the United States of America." Re-inspire that hope, because we could sure use it. Anyways, here are some resources that you can go to. You can go to openmedia.org, or it's Canadian division openmedia.ca. And on Facebook, there are pages such as Open Media International, which is for openmedia.org, and there's an openmedia.ca page for the Canadian division. There is also Expose the TPP, TPP March on Media, Flush the TPP, Expose the TPP USA, TPP Wall of Shame, and other pages. And there's also a group, TPP, TTIP, and Globalization Watch. And there's countless other pages and groups, but I'll leave it. Oh, there's also the World Alliance against the TPP and against the TPP and TTIP. There's plenty of others. I'll leave it to you to find them on your own, where you can get. They'll have links to petitions you can sign and others. And as far as writing a letter to your representative or senator, you can go to their websites, look for the email address, or if there's a form, do that. And to write a letter to the president, on his page, there's actually a form that makes it really easy to write a letter. I might have to write a letter to him myself on this matter. I think it's an important thing for us to do. And let's see. I think that about wraps it up for today. I don't have any bizarre news stories for today, but I think that these are the pressing issues of our time that we really need to get. We need to raise our awareness, raise our voices, and stand up and do something. Because when we stood up and fought SOPA, we won. And looking worldwide, the New Zealanders know how to fight this. They stood up. They raised their voices, and now it's up to us to do it too. And, don't be discouraged by the partisan leanings of your senator or congressman. Write them anyways. Talk to them anyways. Inform them anyways. Let them know what this is up. Because this really affects all of us. We all have different opinions on things like tax distribution, what our tax dollars should be spent on by the government, gun rights / gun control, depending on what side of the aisle you're on. You could think of it as either. Environmental protection provisions, all sorts of things. Wages. We all have our own opinions on those things, but I think that we can all agree that net neutrality is an important thing, because my friends on both sides of the aisles agree on that one. And, I think this is a nonpartisan issue, even though Ted Cruz recently stood up and said and decided to call net neutrality Obamacare for the internet, which basically shows that he has no idea what he's talking about, and has just went on the usual "if Obama's for it, I'm against it" routine. And I do not know why this time the Republicans are not doing that for the TPP, given all the problems that it could cause. The one time they have to agree with the president, it sucks. But, naturally, people have written him back and given him a piece of their minds. So now we have some politicians against net neutrality and slow lanes as well. So please pay attention. We need to stay focused, because I said this several times already, but I'm going to say it again. Digital rights are the free speech issue of our time. We cannot afford to screw this up. So, we've just reached 25 minutes, although we may edit out the beginning of this. This has been the first episode of the Layaways show, and I'm undecided as to whether or not I want to do any more of these, or even do one that was like the original basis was before these pressing issues came up, and I had to do one focused entirely on this. So, give me your feedback. If you liked it and want me to do more, let me know. If you hated it and don't want me to do more, also let me know. And in future episodes, when we do it in the usual format with bizarre news stories as well as scoops on current events and news, I may want to have some guest hosts, and I'm setting it up. I'm working out on how to set it up so that I can plug the audio output of my iPhone into my audio board so that we can have people call in and be a guest host for a show. So if you're interested in doing that one day and we get enough positive feedback on this to do more, let me know. I'd be interested in rapping with you, although I'd have to write up a script ahead of time. This is the second take, and I'm actually following the script a little bit better than I did on the first one. Though, I script most of my videos, so I'll have to write up the script beforehand, although if we have a guest host, there's more time for ad-libbing and what have you. Obviously, I'm not going to ask my guest host to follow a script, but that is it. So give me your feedback and let me know what you think of this if you want me to do more. And that'll conclude it for this episode of the Layaways show. I'm Dave Lay, and that is our show. Thanks for watching.